here, Queen Bee of Honeycomb Coaching, with my trusty sidekick, Mona Lisa, and we are in our 1997 Ford E350 with a fiberglass high top. Her name is Eloise Van Gogh, and today I want to do a little video about finding parking, whether you're in the city or in the wilderness. This is a very common question that I get about where I park, and a question that I see a lot on the van life forums about how to find parking if you're traveling, going through areas that you're unfamiliar with, etc. So I just want to touch on some of the things that I've learned and best practices. First, I want to touch on wilderness parking, and I want to touch on that first just because I experienced it first when I moved into the van a few months ago. First place I went was out into the world, and the first place we camped was in Moab on BLM land. So wilderness parking for van life or RV life, car life, whatever, however you're living in your vehicle. So there are two main ways to go about wilderness camping, and one of them is campgrounds and the other one is free boondocking. So campgrounds are a really good option if you are kind of unfamiliar with the wilderness, maybe haven't spent a lot of time in it, and are mostly hopping from city to city in your vehicle. Campgrounds are great because they're established. There is generally a host or two who can answer basic questions for you, and often they have some kind of amenities, whether that's just a picnic table and a pit toilet, or full hookups and showers, and maybe even laundry, depending on where you are. I know some of the really nice campgrounds have pools or play areas for children, and so they're just a really good option. They're pretty much everywhere. You can find them online or on different apps. And they're really great. The fees vary quite a bit. I've seen overnight fees as low as like $5 or $7, but I've seen them as high as $30 or $40 a night. And again, that just depends on the location, the amenities, and sometimes the time of year. If it's a very popular week, month, weekend, they might cost a little bit more. And some campgrounds you have to reserve ahead of time, and you can do most of that online typically. If not, give them a call and see if you can put in a reservation over the phone. Some campgrounds won't take reservations, and it's a very first come first serve situation. So the best advice I can give there is just to do your research and know what you're getting yourself into as far as that's concerned. Plan out your map, Google campgrounds in the area, and pick a few that might work for you. The other super popular option for wilderness camping is boondocking or camping for free, often on BLM land or National Forest land or something of that nature. You can find BLM land or National Forest land online. I also really strongly recommend the app iOverlander. It's a free app and it shows you a lot of different camping options. Not all the camping options on the app are free. Sometimes they do show you campgrounds and stuff like that, but it's just a really good option if you're going to be living on the road pretty much anywhere. It's very crowdsourced, so sometimes the information might be out of date. But if you go someplace and you camp somewhere, leave a little note saying, like when you were there and what the experience was like, if there were amenities, if any. But that's a really good spot to find free camping or camping around where you are in the moment, or to plan ahead. It's just a great option. I really like it. I have not paid for a campsite at all yet. I mostly do free dispersed camping myself, and it really works for me. One of the biggest things I would recommend about any kind of dispersed camping or, off the main drag camping is just to know your vehicle's abilities. Don't get yourself in a situation that you can't get yourself out of. If you don't have high clearance or four-wheel drive, don't go somewhere that would require you to have high clearance or four-wheel drive. If you're pulling an RV or you're a giant Class A that's very, very long, know your vehicle's abilities, know your vehicle's limits so that you don't get back there and then have some kind of emergency where you need someone to tow you out or help you in some way. Especially back in those areas, there might not be cell service. So that's something to keep in mind. A very common question I get when I talk about camping or just being in the wilderness in general, whether I'm living in my van or hiking or backpacking or whatever, is questions about wildlife. And I don't have too much to comment on the wildlife front just because I have never really had an issue with it. I do travel with my dog, and so she kind of keeps a lot of wildlife at bay. But if you're not camping with a dog or you're just unfamiliar with wildlife, best practices are just to keep your space as clean as possible. Don't leave food out. Don't leave your windows down. Don't leave your trash somewhere. I mean, you really have to respect the environment, and if you don't want wildlife bothering you, don't give them a reason to. Don't leave your trash outside, and don't leave food outside, don't leave a cooler outside or anything like that. So I think that about covers the wilderness camping. If you do still have additional questions, leave them in the comments or send me a message, and I will give you the best advice I can based on my own experiences. Let's move on to city parking and stealth camping in the city. This is a huge one, and I spend about 50% of my time in cities, here in Denver primarily, so far at least, and I've learned a couple of things, a couple of tricks of the trade. And so when you're in a city, just like when you're in the wilderness, there's either campgrounds or BLM camping. When you're in a city, there's either commercial parking lots or residential neighborhoods. And again, pros and cons for both, for sure. Let's start off with commercial, because I think that's where people go first in their mind when they think about parking in a city. Parking at like Walmarts or Cracker Barrels are generally really popular spots. All Walmarts used to let people park overnight there. Not all Walmarts do anymore. So it's really important that you check ahead of time to make sure that you are allowed to park where you're parking. And a couple of ways you can do that. I mean, you can scope out the parking lot area and the store area and see if there's any signs that say no overnight parking. That's kind of a dead giveaway whether you're allowed to park there or not. If you're still not quite sure, you can go inside the store and ask, or call ahead and ask a manager before you even get there so that you can plan around it. And they'll be able to tell you. If you pull in and there are a lot of RVs or vans or anything like that already in the parking lot, and you're just assuming like, oh, everybody else is here, so it must be okay, that's kind of a dangerous game to play, and, play at your own risk. I would still, double check as much as you can ahead of time. The thing about parking in a commercial area and residential, I'll touch on that also, is the noise factor. So you're going to have cars coming in and out, and people with music playing, or people talking, or, people next to you opening and closing their doors or whatever. And so if you're like a really light sleeper or you get spooked easily, that might not be a good area for you. For residential neighborhoods, you want to be aware, again, of the signs. Signage is very important. There can be signs that say no overnight parking, or something about an HOA not allowing, vehicles of a certain size or a certain aesthetic to be parking there. And then also, if you're in a city, there are often signs about street sweeping at certain times of the year. So you want to pay attention to those. Often those don't necessarily prevent you from overnighting there. You just have to be up early and gone before they start the street sweeping so you don't get a ticket or you don't get towed. Picking the right neighborhood can be a little bit of an artsy science. I don't recommend parking in the nicest neighborhoods you see, because chances are those people are very aware of their surroundings and their neighbors and what cars do and don't belong there. And if you're driving a big old van, whether it looks like an RV or not, they're going to know that you're a little bit out of place, and they're more likely to raise the alarm or, knock on your door themselves or call the police to knock on your door for you. So stay away from the really, really nice high-end neighborhoods. But then also in the same vein, don't park in, the worst parts of town either if you don't want to be harassed. And the noise factor definitely comes into play there as well. I try to stick somewhere in the middle where there's kind of a lot of cars on the street already. And usually I try to stay in neighborhoods where I know someone who lives there, for two main reasons. One being that the neighborhood has already seen my van most likely, and so I might not be quite as out of place. And then also, if something happens and somebody does come knock on my door and wonder what I'm doing there, I can always say like, oh, well, my friend lives in this house right here and I'm visiting them or whatever. If you're in an area where you don't know people, that's totally okay too. Like I said, just follow the rules as far as, not staying in the nicest area and not staying in the least nice area. Pick something in the middle with a lot of other cars already. In cities, there are often also a lot of parks, which are great places to stay during the day, but you can't always overnight in a city park or a town park, because there are rules, and a lot of cities have ordinances about no overnight parking, or not being able to park between the hours of like 2 and 4 a.m. or something to that effect, or after sunset and before sunrise. And they do that for a very good reason, just to avoid a lot of shenanigans happening, or teenagers or drug users or things like that. So again, the signage nearby really should tell you whether you can overnight there or not, and err on the side of maybe just not overnighting in parks. One of the points I really want to emphasize, we both really want to emphasize, and I touched on this a little bit, is that you really need to be a good steward when you're in a van. I mean, we already have a stigma against us, thanks to SNL a long time ago. We're going to live in a van down by the river. Everybody's heard that skit, and if you live in a van, you've heard people ask you that same question probably a million times, maybe 1.5 million. But so there's a stigma associated with people who live in vehicles, and it's not necessarily a good one. And I really just want to make sure that you guys are all being sensitive and aware of your surroundings, and also just being a good steward to the land if you're out in the wilderness, and to your neighbors in the city. Don't leave trash. Don't be a creep. Don't, leave the place worse off than you found it. Like, you always need to leave any place better than you found it. If you find trash that somebody else left, pick that shit up. Don't leave your own. And just be a good human being. Abide by the regulations if there are some. Yeah, if you're living in a city, then maybe arrive to your parking area late and leave early. Don't creep people out. Don't leave a mess, whether you're in the city or in the wilderness or anything. And just be a good human being. So I think that's basically everything I know about parking in a nutshell. If you have additional questions, like I said, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments or send me a message. Come over and follow me and Lisa on Instagram and Facebook under Honeycomb Coaching, and I hope you guys are having an awesome day.